Hello, thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, for the latest of my deep dive videos. This one is into the square between Saturn and Uranus, which is dominating year 2021, but goes on through to the 21st of January 2022, although we do have a bit of a hiatus from the 23rd of July this year. Now, this event first occurred in a broad sense, a 3-degree gap from the second week of January. It then occurred first of all on the 12th of February. It's going to be repeated on the 24th of December. So the 14th of June is the midpoint of the journey, if you like. Now, as ever, I'm going to share with you on the screen what the impact of the event as it begins is going to have in its wider context. So we're not just talking about Saturn square Uranus, we're looking at the other planetary interactions. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Also, if you'd like to grab yourself your free daily horoscope direct to your device each morning, please see the link below. And also, if you'd like to take advantage of my fantastic combination of forecast, year's forecast and character analysis based on your time, date and place of birth and get 30% off, please see the link below. So on the screen you can see that we have Saturn going into its exact square on the 14th of June, and Uranus is at 1306, and there we are, we have Saturn at 1306. But they have been, as I mentioned before, within 3 degrees, been in conflict since the second week of January. Now, what makes this combination so very, very unique is they're both the ruling planets of the sign Aquarius. So we have to understand some of the characteristics of the sign of Aquarius. Now, if you read, sort of like popular stuff around astrology, it says that Aquarians are zany, unpredictable, good friends, quite unique in some ways. And some of that energy definitely comes from the more innovative vibe of Uranus, which is the higher octave planet. It's the newer ruler of the sign. But the more traditional ruler of the sign is Saturn. And Saturn is, of course, very much about stability. It's about structures, limitations. It's about frameworks. It can be about where we feel authority, and it can be about our need to be reliable, dependable, work hard, be very applied. So despite this archetype of Aquarius being this kind of zany, off-the-wall character, actually most Aquarians have a duality to their nature. So they can be forward-thinking and do like a bit of space, and can be, of course, quite detached because it's an air sign, but equally they can really like the regularity in their lives. So because it's a fixed sign, having things on a constant basis gives a lot of Aquarius, despite this reputation for trying new things, actually very traditional, very much upholding past connections, past heritage. So it's not all future orientated, but Uranus is very much about truth. And of course it's an electric energy, so it's impatient for change, where Saturn modifies that because it's respecting that past experience, those past influences, that past heritage. So when we get the two of them in conflict, rather than working in simpatico like they do for people born under the sign of Aquarius, we are in for some trouble. And the other thing is that Uranus has been in the sign of Taurus, first of all from the middle of May 2018 through to the middle of November 18, came back into Taurus on March the 7th, 2019, and been there ever since. So what we've had this year is the agitation that they're creating is that we have the resistance of Saturn, and we have the freedom loving of Uranus in conflict. And of course we've had a lot of lockdown rules, and it would seem with Mercury being retrograde at the moment as this event occurs. The Sun being in a square with Neptune. We've got Jupiter going into retrograde at the end of this week commencing the 14th. I do feel that we are going to see a pushback against some of the freedoms that have been teased recently. Maybe we've had a little bit more freedom in the Western world, but it's very likely that COVID is going to prove to be very stubborn and very resistant even to the jab that many people are choosing to have. So, what does this chart tell us? Well, before I go into that, I must say also at the end of this video, I will do an overview for each of the 12 zodiac signs so you can get a taste of what this event is going to hold for you, both this year and through to the first 3 weeks of January next year, when it finally comes to an end. What happens is that Uranus ends its retrograde on the 17th of January, and by the 21st, Saturn has moved forwards enough so the gap between them is up to 4 degrees rather than within 3. So that gap is known as the orb. Now, in a natal horoscope, if you had Saturn within, say, 7 or 8 degrees of any angle on any important influence, such as the Sun, the Moon, or whatever, Venus, a natal astrologer will take that into account. But for these move-in transits, I use 3 degrees because I think that gives us a much greater amount of accuracy. Now, some astrologers will only focus on the events themselves and won't take into account the 3 degrees. But I think that this influence has been there all year pretty well, and it has been creating stuff like headaches, migraines, irritability, tension, restless legs, sleepless nights. And if you're born anything from 0 degrees through to about 16 degrees, or you have inner planets from 0 to 16 in any of the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, or you have your ascendant or your moon in those places, you will definitely have been affected quite strongly by this influence. Because Uranus isn't at its best in the sign of Taurus, it's in full, but it is asking us to think of new ways of earning money, or to be more innovative, or to perhaps to be more flexible, which Taurus energy resists, being fixed like Aquarius energy. But also we're seeing that, you know, there's things being tested out in some countries where people get paid money every month by direct government, but work less hours. So that kind of innovative approach to funding the society model is going to be coming more into vogue in the next few years. But of course, you also get situations that we have in Myanmar, we've had in Russia, we have in China, we have in North Korea, we've had in Syria, where the oppressive energies of Saturn, the desire to maintain power, pushes back against anyone who's pushing for freedom. So that's why Alex Navalny has been arrested. Anyone who belongs to his organization in Russia is going to be arrested, closed down. You know, we've had the oppression of Muslims in China. We have the oppression of democracy seekers in Myanmar. And obviously Syria has been a complete and utter disaster. And that's been going on for some while, of course, but the powers in these countries, although Saturn in Aquarius you might think would be more about democracy because the sign is about higher truths and higher values, no, we're seeing energies that are more redolent of Capricornian Saturn. So it's hanging on to those old ways of doing things. And if we don't change this, particularly around the way we consume, the way we fly, the way we travel, the way we're totally focused on consumer products to an exclusion of understanding what the impact of that is, we're in big trouble with the earth. What does Taurus represent? The earth, because it's the foundation, it's the structure. So we have to revise our thinking. And of course there are agencies, people, individuals, countries, states who are doing everything they can to avoid adapting to a new, fairer way of being. But then also, of course, we got things like gangsters using technology, Uranus, in Taurus, money, to sell things that people want to consume, drugs, and trying to avoid the law Saturn in Aquarius. So there's lots of different ways that this particular influence is being manifested. But just let's look at this wheel on the screen. So the ascendant, based as always for myself, the event actually happens at 11 p.m. Universal Central Time. The event for me, I'm basing on Greenwich. So that gives us an ascendant 21 degrees in Capricorn. It means it's conjunct Pluto. And we also have Saturn and Jupiter not quite retrograde, in the first house. So that's our individuality. That's our desire to do as we want. And there's going to be some people who really want to still do as they want and maybe rule breakers, with Pluto being on the ascendant and opposite the descendant. So they're people who are going to be potentially reckless, potentially very willful. We also, as you can see, have Mars in Leo, which is a very grand, lovely place for Mars to be, but it is just on that 7th house cusp. And you can also see that the midpoint of this particular chart is 19 degrees Cancer. So again, very close to that descendant. So we have Pluto opposite the descendant, Pluto opposite Mars, but if you look closely, we also have Saturn opposite Moon. So my proposition is that this particular phase of Saturn square Uranus, which is going to go on through till the 23rd of July, and then it stretches out beyond the 4 degrees. This is because Saturn is already in retrograde. That began on the 23rd of May. It goes into direct motion on the 11th of October, but Uranus goes into retrograde on August the 20th, and as I said before, doesn't come out of retrograde until next year on the 17th of January. So what we have on this chart is Pluto opposite the descendant and conjunct the ascendant. So that's the desire for people to do as they wish, but because it's also opposite Mars, that can see rule breaking. It can see, I think, civil disorder, the potential for that. You can also see the potential for conflict, wars. I can only be truthful about that. And then, of course, we have Saturn and Uranus are in the exact square. That's a given. But we also have the Sun in a right angle with Neptune. And because if we think about this chart, Neptune's in the 2nd house of resources. We also have Chiron there. So I think that's people worrying about making money if they're furloughed or not able to run their businesses. This creates great anxiety over an ability to pay bills and keep our heads above water. But we also have in a solar concept, Neptune in the 12th house and the Sun in the 3rd house. So that creates the potential for cross wires, false information. You know, don't be believing a lot of what you read by politicians. Also big business, you know, more and more power is falling into fewer hands. And that makes us, and because we rely on a lot of technology, that means they have more and more control over us. When people are saying about vaccine passports and worrying about the technological tracing on it, the horse has bolted ages ago from the stable. You know, they know so much about us. But that square between Neptune and the Sun can create exhaustion as well as confusion. We do have a brilliant angle between Uranus and Venus. We need to learn to associate and relate and love in a new and innovative way. We have no choice. But I think that block between Saturn and the Moon is really instructive. That does point towards more limitation in terms of staying at home, staying safe, keeping a distance. Some of these rules are probably likely to be reimposed, I think, or we're not going to have quite the level of freedom that we thought we were going to have only a short while ago. And of course, Mercury's in retrograde, which always creates the potential for backtracking, changes of policy. I mean, the British government have been absolutely hopeless from the beginning. You know, maybe they got it together with, you know, giving the jab out, but hopeless amounts of bad decision making. And unlike in the States, where I feel that public figures and people in high positions of authority can get held to account. I don't feel that happens in Britain very much. It's always people further down the food chain who tend to get hammered, not the people who set the rules. And, you know, we have got some, you know, very dark stuff's gone on over the last year, which has definitely cost a lot of people their lives. And of course, we've had a lot of deconstruction to social services, and you know, it's been orientated much more to do with profit and, you know, friends of influential people. Social care is an important part of what connects us all as human beings. And even if you're someone who's a staunch Republican in America, which I really can respect, the desire to be independent and, you know, create your own sort of security and be dependent on yourself, which I have tremendous respect for. That's very much my personal values. We still need to have some kind of safety net for those who are less fortunate. And as COVID shows, a lot of people can get dragged into a situation where they don't have any money coming in very, very easily. So this event is a potential for a limitation on our freedom. It's the potential for oppressive power used negatively that stops us having the right of free speech. It does point towards us needing to find new ways to fund our lifestyles. It points to us having a tension in our bodies, because Saturn square Uranus, Uranus is the nervous system. Well, Mercury can rule the nervous system as well, but Uranus, because of its electric, impatient energy, its desire to change things immediately, if you put the resistance there of Saturn, that creates a lot of tension. So headaches, restless legs, sleeplessness, all that kind of stuff can really come into play from now through to the 23rd of July. But then we are going to have that hiatus. It will be the last 5 weeks of the year that this comes back within 3 degrees. It peaks again on Christmas Eve. Cheers, thanks for that. And then on my birthday, the 21st of January, yes, all cards and generous donations are very, very welcome. The 21st of January next year, how ironic, it finally comes to a close, because this Saturn is sat right on my moon, right on my Venus, right on my Chiron, in the 4th house of home, and Uranus, obviously in solar astrology, is in the 4th house for Aquarius people. We're trying to move. There's been, you know, a lot of glitches and delays and frustrations. So, you know, I can completely get how difficult this aspect has been. But I'm now going to share each of the 12 zodiac sign forecasts briefly to give you a bit of an insight in how you personally can deal with this situation. Now, for you, Aries, it's very much about how you'd like to earn your living. The idealism comes from Saturn in the 11th house. The reality of your situation is Uranus in the 2nd. So it could be sudden costs, sudden changes at work, more demands at work, or it could be that you're feeling really hemmed in by the current circumstances that you find yourself in your life, and you're feeling conflicted, you're having to make some trades, you're not getting everything you want. But this is still a fabulous opportunity for you to think afresh. You're an innovator, you're someone who starts things afresh, you see trends developing. Use that gift to try to find new ways to re-engineer, realign your purpose in this fast changing, very difficult world that we're living in. Now for you, Taurus, obviously Uranus is in your sign, and it has been pushing you over the last few years, especially with that collection of energy last year, 20, in the sign of Capricorn in your 9th solar house. All of that was pushing you to make a change. You may have made that change or in the process of making that change, but are feeling quite sort of torn between how it was and how it's developing. So, and there may be quite a lot of pressures through your work. It may feel that the liberty that you were seeking has proved a bit illusory. You may have some of it, but not all that you want. And it could be your work that you're still thinking of changing. Now, Gemini, of all the zodiac signs, I'm sorry to say I do think that you're being hit the hardest in some ways, at least of the non-fixed signs, but in terms of your sun, by this influence, because you've got Uranus in the 12th house, which is really putting your nerves on edge, a lot of psychological energy, and Saturn's in your sector of truth, but the truths may be coming in a bit of a harsh way. Saturn can be harsh, we know that. So it may feel a lot of dark old stuff is getting dragged up, which is rather difficult to get through. But take faith, because you are such a bright, bubbly sign, and you do have the sun in your sign for this event. And yes, it is being conflicted by Neptune. So you are being asked to think afresh, and it may be that changes keep having to be made. You keep flexing, but you're doing better than you imagine that you're doing. It's just because you're such a logical sign, you're so bubbly and buzzy, and having to become more conscious of your subconscious, your shadow side, is what Uranus keeps pushing you in a very unpredictable and niggly way to do. But if you're someone who's very at peace with that, and you recognize that this is part of a process you need to go through over the next 6 years or so, you may be doing really, really well. And Saturn's in that part of your situation that's to do with knowledge. And the more you grow your psychological knowledge, not just your technical, intellectual, or humour knowledge, because you're very strong in all those areas. Your social knowledge is very strong. If you're growing your awareness to what really makes you tick, your truer, deeper needs, and becoming more at ease to your vulnerabilities, you can fly. You can really embrace this aspect well. Now, Cancer, for you, Uranus is in the part of your horoscope to do with your future, to do with your friendships. And because Saturn's in the sector of long-term finances and where you're deeply invested, it may be that if you're wanting to be more innovative in your approach, it's got to be paid for somehow. And that's the conflict that's being represented by this aspect, and will be in quite a strong way through to the 23rd of July. But I think it's just making you more and more aware that you have to have different plans, different strategies. And if you do that, you can still be really excited. Uranus is giving you a lot of excitement about changing things up and doing things in a different way. And of course, the midpoint of this chart is in your sign at 19 degrees Cancer. So it's a very Cancerian event. Is there anything really challenging there? Well, yes, that the ascendant is opposite your midpoint. So that's just asking you to be very conscious of relationships. Diplomacy is really important. I think because you've had Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter opposite in a series of phases since 2008 with Pluto, since late 2017 with Capricorn, there probably has been quite a lot of change around relationships. So I think this particular chart is saying, look, try to find peace. You're someone who doesn't like confrontation, but your way of dealing with confrontation can be to withdraw. And withdrawing can be just as painful as someone being more assertive. So I think you're being asked, with Uranus's help, to emerge and say how you feel. Share your truth. It will make you feel so much better. Leo. Okay, well, of course, the moon for this event is in Leo, so that's profound. And that means that perhaps you have to trust your instincts and have faith in the way things are developing for you. And Saturn's in your sector of relating, and Uranus is in your sector of how you fit in with the wider world. What I'm getting for this for you is that if someone close to you doesn't support some changes you're trying to make to your worldly role or your work, that can cause a pinch point between you. But with the moon in your sign, but also Mars, you have an opportunity here to both use your empathy, but also your drive and passion to try to get what you need. But with Saturn blocking your moon on this event, I do feel that if there is a tender issue around a relationship with Saturn in that retrograde in your 7th house, you're going to have to look at it. You can't keep avoiding it. And if that means a change in your life, and often Leo people will do everything to avoid changes. Yes, you've got a reputation of, you're ruled by the sun, so you are very charismatic, very warm-hearted, can be very popular, but there's part of you that can be very dependent on staying in situations which provide a degree of security. and maybe you're being asked to be a bit more self-dependent on the basis of this particular event. Now, Virgo, for you, the conflict that's been created this year is between where you're devoted, applied, sacrificing, you help others, you're a really good egg, but Uranus keeps saying to you, look, I want to be free. And that conflict is just going to be increased between now and the 23rd of July. So if you're in a job, for example, where you're highly respected, you're highly proficient, but it's not really very exciting for you, you feel it's as dull as the proverbial ditch water, once more you're being asked to think about different options. And you know, if you're staying with something because you know it well, that's totally understandable, but Uranus isn't going to get off your case. It's going to keep pressing you over the next 6 years to create some variety in your life, whether it's how you work, how you live, where you actually live. All these things, the more space and freedom and flexibility you have, the happier you are going to be. But if you have got some obligations where you have to put other people first, some responsibilities, or it's to do with your work, or some health limitations, you may be feeling a little bit frustrated at the present time, but it will get a lot better from the 23rd of July. Now, Libra, of course, Saturn's in your 5th house, which is all about demonstrativeness, romanticism, creativity. It's to do with warmth. And Saturn ain't really very famous for any of those things, are they? So Saturn in the 5th house can be a bit hard going, but it also can push you to make the most of your talents. And if there is a love relationship that you're in and you find it a bit difficult, to work harder to make it work. That's Saturn asking us to use that perspiration and application to improve things. But Uranus is in a part of your horoscope to do with long-term money, investment, entrepreneurship, but also where you're closely connected to someone else. So if you're in a love relationship that hasn't got much spark, there isn't much sexual charisma between you, and you're yearning for that, maybe this chart is asking you to think very carefully, because you've got Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter in this chart, in your 4th house, solar, in this particular chart. Obviously, they're in the 1st house. So I just feel that Pluto has continued to be quite a trying dimension for you since 2008, but particularly over the last couple of years with the support of Saturn. So if you're staying in a home situation to keep yourself safe, but you're starving yourself of some essential joys, that's what this event is asking you to think about. Confront your tendency to avoid difficulty because you can't really be fussed. You'd rather put it off. So therefore you live in a sort of limbo land where some of your needs get met, but not all of them. And perhaps Uranus is saying to you, look, live your life right on the edge because it's more exciting, even if it's more challenging. Scorpio. Now, as I said, because you're a fixed sign, certainly if you've got any planets positions right up to 16 degrees of Scorpio, you may be really feeling the whack of this particular event and have done all year. So what can you do? Well, it's basically saying to you, if you're locked into a home, you live in a home where there's a lack of space, there's too many people crammed in for you, or you're not enjoying sharing that space with those people anymore. Flatmates, could be in the family, could be in a relationship, it depends on you. But Saturn's in your 4th house, so it's making you feel probably a bit miserable if it's not as good as you'd like it to be. And Uranus is in the part of your chart that's saying, I will do what I want. If I need to liberate myself, I will. And of course, in this chart, your 2 rulers are in mortal conflict. So maybe that more forceful side of your nature, particularly with Mars right at the top of your chart in your 10th house, could see you finally take some action, particularly between now and the 23rd of July. Now, Sagittarius, for you, Saturn's in the part of your horoscope, how you think, your ideals, your immediate environment, interactions with neighbours, siblings, technology, and Uranus is in the part of your situation to do with your work, but also your health, your commitments and obligations. If you're holding on to a belief system which has basically seen its day because the world is moving so fast, it's not applicable to the world we're living in, it may be time for an upgrade in your thinking. On the other hand, if you're in a job which is very much to do with technology and you're blinking good at it, or it's to do with data flows, or it's to do with software, or it's to do with selling hardware, or it's to do with travel in some way, particularly short-term travel or distribution, but you're finding it dull and it's not really feeding that side of your nature which loves drama, then this event is asking you to think again. But because Neptune's in your sector of emotion, squaring with the Sun in your sector of relationships, you can't really make those changes to your work without it being in some kind of unity with your relationship, whether it's the relationship to yourself or where you live, or your partner if you have one. Now, Capricorn, Saturn is your traditional ruler. It's in your second house of money, and it's squaring with Uranus in your fifth house of risk and expenditure. So if you're feeling that you want to try something but you can't because circumstances don't make it a good time to be too gung-ho, then that could be making you feel, really miserable. Now, of course, Pluto is on the ascendant, and the ascendant's in your sign. So you're given a lot of extra help, but because you've got that descendant very close to the midpoint and also Mars, if you're too combative in the way that you work with other people, that may create tension may come back to you. So it's working with collaboratively rather than just seeing it through the prism of your own situation. That's vitally important. But I do feel that if you can't innovate or you can't earn money at the speed you want, it may be feeling really frustrating. So all you can do is take a deep breath and try to go again and continue to bring your skill set to the equation, which is that enormous steadfastness. And remember, if anyone can work with Saturn, it's you, because you're used to really putting in the effort in a sustained way over a long period of time. You do not play around. Once you apply yourself, it's awesome. But it may be that you're in a kind of middling phase where you're not quite where you want to be, because Uranus is shaking up what you want, shaking up a lot over the last couple of years. And that may have surprised you, what you want to free yourself from and what you want to take yourself towards. Aquarius, now obviously this event features your two rulers, so it's particularly appropriate for you that we're exploring this from your sign's perspective. If it's anything like my chart, it has been pretty frustrating. Things do seem to be moving at the speed of a glacier, even if we've got some glaciers dashing along these days quicker than they've probably ever done. But, all we can do really is dig in. And a bit like Capricorn folk, Aquarius folk, once they really like and enjoy something, can be steadfast. But I think because Uranus is in the fourth house, something around where you live, your emotional situation, it could be around a close relationship, that has probably been changing, or your needs around it are changing. You're feeling more hemmed in, or you need to be more free. So some kind of changes around where you live seems just absolutely desirable, whether it's spending more time outside your home with walking, being in nature, fourth house, whether it means working from home. Uranus does make you very innovative. You can see trends in a fresh and different way. You can come up with brilliant ideas, but Saturn's saying to you, if you come up with those good ideas, you've got to be very structured and disciplined to deliver on them. Otherwise, you're just going to end up trying lots of different things all at once, and it all comes to nothing. And of course, Neptune's in your second house of resources, squaring with the Sun. Not a great time for risk, because that combination can create confusion or distorted information coming your way. So go careful. And of course, we have the Moon opposite Saturn. So you may find that however much you try to reach out to people between now and the 23rd of July, the responses you get are a little muted. What I would say to you is that through the first 3 weeks of July, Venus and Mars are conjunct in Leo. Now, some people will have different views on this. I think that does give you the opportunity to bring a new relationship into your life. So we can just leap beyond this forecast. No one else has got this but you guys. It's because I'm one of you. You know that. So yes, we've got that to look forward to. Go on. And finally, Pisces. Right, Saturn's in your 12th house of psychology. Uranus in your 3rd house of everyday interactions, the nervous system, technology. So anxiety, the subconscious side of your nature, the bits about yourself you don't really want to look at, they actually can create quite a lot of excess nervous energy. A great thing to do, of course, is to be fitter. We've got some new bikes. Every time I go out on those bikes, I can feel, the endorphins pop in at the end, and the stress we've been feeling recently is pushed back. So that's something to work at. Also, anything that's got a rich amount of minerals in it, diet-wise, particularly magnesium, might be quite soothing on your system. I am not a doctor. You must consult your general physician. But what I would say is that worry has probably been a bit of the part of the scene for you this year. And I think because Neptune, your ruler, is squaring with the sun in your 4th house, where you're living, who with, you may still be feeling very nostalgic for the past loved ones who are no longer with us, past places you once resided. There may be a real sense of, should I go back to somewhere that I once lived? Or it could be that you need to adapt where you're living now to create greater peace and a greater sense of sanctuary. But if you can get into nature, I really would do that. That completes this presentation of Saturn square Uranus. So just to repeat, it began broadly 2nd week of January. It peaked Feb 17. It peaks June 14. It begins again within 3 degrees, or it ends within 3 degrees on the 23rd of July, and it comes back within 3 degrees the last 5 weeks of this year and the first 3 weeks of 2022, and it peaks on Christmas Eve. Thank you so much, take care, good luck, and goodbye.